Why don't Pokemon games have guns? Well, because it's a kid's game, because Pokemon already shoot fire, the gun probably couldn't kill a Pokemon with more than 100 defense. There were guns at the enemy because it wouldn't fit the gameplay, because Game Freak couldn't animate a gun, or maybe it's just a dumb idea. All valid reasons. Please don't type those in the comments. But more interestingly, why hasn't the Pokemon world made guns? Most fictional worlds either have firearms or some kind of weird new form of weaponry, but why not Pokemon? In this video, I'll be going over details found in the Pokemon games that hint about weapon development and why Pokemon games don't utilize guns. Hi, my name is Cameron, I'm an avid Pokemon fan, and it confused me a little after making my last Pokemon video about war and politics, why new weapons aren't made in the Pokemon world. Team Flare was on the cutting edge of technology with all their Pokemon-related gadgets, but they had to revive a 3,000-year-old anime murder beam to complete their plans? Seems weird. The United States hasn't fought a hot war against a country of their economical or military equals in a while, yet they still make more and more weapons each year. The US might be a bad example to jump to when thinking about peace, but the lack of militarization in the Pokemon world, although pleasant, seems strange. Like there isn't a trainer class called Arms Dealer or Weapons Maker or Unabomber. Again, that's a good thing, but what benefit or detriment would the Pokemon games get if every gym leader had a Glock? I bring up the US as an example because guns are prevalent everywhere you go there, and that maybe the Pokemon world not developing guns is a good thing? Okay, it's a good thing, clearly. Obviously this is a very silly query being cradled by a very serious topic, so I'll tread carefully while discussing this. I in no way endorse the militarization of an entire population, or introducing advanced weaponry to a culture that doesn't need it. Gun violence is a real problem in a lot of places in the modern world, and I don't want to perpetuate it. I will be talking about a video game full of fictional people and a fictional world, but if the topics bend into real-world discourse, I will try to keep it historical and tasteful. The Pokemon anime has an inconsistent use of weaponry, and I think the games are more interesting to talk about because of the variety of perspectives that aren't Ash Ketchum. So we'll stick to the games again and use the anime if visually required like last time. So let's start with a short history of Firearms. As many of you might already be aware, the modern gun and its many predecessors would not exist without gunpowder. It is the earliest known chemical mixture that causes things to explode, consisting of sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate. It was first used in China in the 9th century in the Tang Dynasty as fireworks for celebratory use. It would later be developed by the military into a primitive type of gun, more coolly called the hand cannon. They sucked complete ass compared to what we use today, but this is the first iteration of the gun that we know. But this isn't an episode of Brief History, so why do we care? Well, Pokemon don't exactly bust out the periodic table and go, here are the main elements and here's our fantasy nonsense to go along with it, now go make a bomb. So we need to look towards documented accounts of technology being used in the games that correlate to the use of known elements. This can be as simple as deducing that the people of the Pokemon world know how electricity works, not because electric Pokemon exist, but because they have working lights, and therefore implement copper, tungsten, nitrogen, to name a few things that go in a light bulb. So does the Pokemon world have similar base components for gunpowder that for us led to the invention of guns? Well, if you recall a particularly romantic scene from Pokemon X and Y, then yes, they do. You might notice something interesting from watching this scene, and that is that these don't sound like usual fireworks. They almost have a glassy sound instead of the usual explosion. Today, people have made more silent fireworks that don't sound like cannons going off, but nothing that sounds like this. However, the development of these types of fireworks came way after the loud explosion type ones. It might be safe to say that although Pokemon's version might include some fantasy nonsense, these, or at least some proto-version of this display, involved gunpowder, and their gunpowder was used for similar reasons as us originally. So the Pokemon world and ours have almost identical origins for gunpowder. That's incredible! Why did it stop there? Our world's development of weapons has been long and unfortunately fruitful, with guns getting more and more deadly every couple of decades for the past 100 years. Pokemon shows very little in technological development throughout its titles. However, in Pokemon Legends Arceus, a game that takes place in the distant past, we see almost nothing helpful of what we're talking about. Normally, one wouldn't bring up something that isn't helpful, but I want to mention how confusing this game's setting is. In the past world, where people have mastered basic tools to build houses and walls, but are still afraid of Pokemon, there are almost zero precautions to stop a Pokemon attack. By the time your character gets there from the future, the Pokeball's been invented and utilized by the guards of the town. But they have nothing before that. They have no weapons. The guards have super weak Pokemon and are inexperienced fighters and have nothing visible to fall back on. There is a giant Rapidash in walking distance from your town. There is nothing in place to prevent it from torching everybody. No swords, spears, even shields. One guy has one suit of armor and that's it. What were they doing before they caught Bidoofs? There is talk of death and disaster all throughout the beginning of the game, and the townsfolk who claim they aren't good with Pokemon don't think to make bigger versions of their tools to fight back. The crafting kit doesn't even seem like there's a knife in it. This is where I start to feel like I'm in Clown World. Even if no one was there to invent a usable weapon, there is a large list of Pokemon who use weapons that someone could have replicated. Specifically, in Old Hisui, there's the Oshawott line, the Cipher line, and Decidueye. And not to get ahead of myself in the timeline, but Galarian Slowbro has a literal gun for a hand and Remoraid is a gun. It boggles my mind that they don't have at least sharp sticks lying around in case of an emergency. Rant aside, weapons obviously aren't the main export in any Pokemon game. On the surface, all we see are old school Pokemon tamers with whips and policemen with batons. Two weapons that didn't just happen, but were developed over time, at least on our end. If we want to consider Pokemon Conquest as canon, they have a lot of implied warfare and weaponry in a setting resembling feudal Japan. We seem to have pieces of history, but little connecting them together. We don't know what fuels or funds the creation of weapons, nor do we know their uses by named characters. However, we do have one more interesting jumping off point, one young Pokemon fans didn't expect to encounter when first playing Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Lake Valor was blown up by Team Galactic's Galactic Bomb. Horrible name, good branding, bad outcome. But this unseen device drained all the water from the lake. We have no idea the components of this device, but an explosion being mistaken as a tremor and strong enough to drain a lake is no bomb that just got invented. So strong explosives are possible in the Pokemon world. Good to know, if not scary. However, that isn't the most powerful thing in Pokemon games. AZ made the ultimate weapon 3,000 years prior to Pokemon X and Y, where we see fireworks for the first time. It's powered by Pokemon souls, I guess? So either AZ had some big brain energy before making it, or gunpowder just wasn't destructive enough for him. Either way, there seems to be a consensus that alternative weaponry is too convoluted for people and just not worth it most of the time. The people of the Pokemon world, I guess, are fully capable of making guns if so desired. Obviously to us, Pokeballs are more complicated than firearms and have similar raw material requirements. But also, like, they made a death weapon already? That's like having a supercomputer before calculators. Along with other countless technological marvels, it's safe to say that they could make boomsticks. But let's return to the original question and get a more serious answer on why weapons are not prevalent in the Pokemon world and why there aren't guns. As discussed in a previous video, the Pokemon world is relatively peaceful. Quick rundown though, they had a troubled past and some occasional terrorism in the present, but otherwise is uneventful. Thankfully, there isn't a need for every citizen to be packing. Even if there were, most Pokemon would be more dangerous than an automatic weapon. Plus they're cuter, which I'm sure is something that has been in the back of our minds this whole video. Now Pokemon are more dangerous than guns. Why have them at all? But like, not all of them. You think a normal ass Starly is better than a rifle? Even the best one against an RPG is pitiful. I would like everyone watching this video to put down their fresh water and take a leap of faith with me. I'm going to make a comparison we might not want to consider. What if Pokeballs are the guns? Okay, hear me out. If Pokeballs are a firearm equivalent, that sort of fills in some of the holes. Both were developed a long time ago with base raw materials, both have gone under several design changes, both are produced in mass in the modern world, and they both aren't the part that's dangerous about them. A gun is nothing without a bullet, and a Pokeball is a poor investment without a Pokemon inside. If anything, Pokeballs are more useful than guns. One gun can only fire a single-sized bullet, whereas any Pokeball could contain any Pokemon. Sure, that Pokemon could be a Caterpie, but also a Metagross, including the fact that not every gun owner has the firearm that could kill God. Now this doesn't excuse Pokemon's poor world building on what people used before Pokeballs, but it makes some sense as to why other weapons weren't developed. Continuing to iterate on the Pokeball seems like the best idea. Now this idea does sound like it stems from the Pokemon are better than guns argument, which is sort of true, but what we see with this comparison is a new light on the industry as a whole. Pokeballs are one of the cheapest items you can buy at any Pokemart. It's hard to imagine a pistol costing the same amount as gum in a 7-Eleven, but this has led to most characters you encounter in games having them, along with accompanying Pokemon. There aren't a ton of new Pokeball types made after Generation 4. But a recent addition to the list has an interesting origin. In Generation 7, we got the Beast Ball, a special Pokeball developed by the Aether Foundation to catch Ultra Beasts. It boasts a powerful capture rate on those creatures of ×5 while being virtually impossible to use to catch a normal Pokemon. So a private company made a Pokeball to be specially used against a perceived enemy and not for the local population. Now, I'm not calling the Aether Foundation a private defense contractor, I'm just saying that between them and the Pokeball factory in Gen 6, making balls en masse for a global market, the similarities are striking. But also, yes, the Aether Foundation is evil. The head is a literal anime villain, and they birthed and tortured a Chimera Pokemon. It's also worth mentioning that the Sylph Co., who is credited as making modern-day Pokeballs, was easily controlled by the Mafia, and for all we know is still to some degree. Now, there isn't any military or militia requesting weapons be made, so there is little need for them in mass. So why are there companies making Pokeballs in such large quantities? Why aren't there more people like Kurt the Ball Maker locally sourcing them as needed? Being a Pokemon trainer does seem to be a popular profession/hobby, but what could be the reason for so many balls? Overall, it feels like a corporate-backed market. If it worked how everything else did seemingly in the Pokemon world, there wouldn't be great and Ultra Balls, there would be ones that worked the best and maybe situational ones like Net and Dive Balls. It's barely supply and demand, as you can repeatedly buy infinite balls at any Pokemart without fail. There's just so many of them compared to the amount of people to trainer ratio that exists. If we think of Pokeballs and Pokemon as destructive in nature, this side of the Pokemon world's infrastructure comes off as kinda dark. This huge market to capture these creatures, sure to do lots of other things besides battling, but to potentially arm every household, every citizen. I've said balls over 20 times in this script already, it's getting really exhausting. I should wrap this up before I start calling every bug catcher in the game a paramilitary. Calling back on my power structure video, trainer items seem to be an outlier of specialty goods controlled by corporations and private entities, for some reason. This reason I would love to have an answer about. If you have a theory, let me know in the comments. Parts of the battling scene in the Pokemon world seem so out of place compared to everything else. I want to end on mentioning something I thought was very interesting in Pokemon Legends Arceus. This involves minor spoilers, but the plot of this game is so stupid I wouldn't worry about it. At the end of the post-game, Ginkgo Guild member Volo fights you on top of Spear Pillar, and his trainer class changes to Pokemon Wielder. Lots of characters have used Pokemon in malicious ways and barely saw them as partners, but Volo takes it a step further and wears it proudly on his skin. He wields Pokemon like weapons. It's a dangerous mindset to think about, because at the end of the day, partners aside, these creatures are dangerous and deadly in the wrong hands. Volo is also among the only 3 Pokemon battles in the series in which more than 6 Pokemon are used at once. This includes Greevil from Gale of Darkness and Getsis from Gen 5. Not exactly characters you want to be lumped in with. Pokemon are awesome, and they undoubtedly make the world they inhabit a better place. In an average Pokemon battle, with all willing participants, there isn't a big problem. But used under different circumstances, often they are dangerous entities being wielded by dangerous and corruptible people. So what if there aren't guns? A child in Palatown was given a Squirtle, who soon will evolve to have the PSI power to cut metal like paper. Maybe this was all one egg that wasn't supposed to hatch. Yeah, there aren't guns in Pokemon. Whether in-universe that was a conscious decision or not, I think it's nice that the Pokemon world is spared from any extra violence. Hey, thanks for watching this video. I enjoyed making it. Subscribe for more of these, I guess, and come watch me on Twitch where I have these thoughts, but longer and more exasperated.